In June 2024, the European Union activated the Artificial Intelligence Act, marking the start of the world's first comprehensive legal framework for algorithmic systems. The legislation represents a massive effort by European lawmakers to establish a universal baseline for safety and trustworthiness in the digital market. The Act operates through a risk-based tier system. It categorizes AI systems by their potential for harm, placing the heaviest compliance burdens on high-risk applications like biometric identification and critical infrastructure. Many developers operate under the assumption that compliance is a straightforward task of satisfying the rules within this single document. However, the AI Act functions as part of a much larger ecosystem. Its true impact is defined by the complex legal environment it was deployed into. This environment is the pre-existing EU digital legislative framework, a collection of massive regulations, including the GDPR, the Digital Services Act, and the Cyber Resilience Act. While these laws pursue legitimate policy aims, like data privacy and market competition, they were developed in relative isolation over many years. Dropping the AI Act onto this foundation creates a dense matrix of intersecting requirements. This creates compliance red zones, where deployment nodes are forced to navigate overlapping and frequently duplicative legal obligations. This regulatory friction is a systemic threat. It has the potential to paralyze technological deployment across the European internal market. To understand the scale of this problem, we have to systematically map the digital landscape to see where the AI Act actually collides with existing law. This chart shows the official categorization of the EU's digital regulations, split into domains for fundamental rights, data, information society, and security. These laws are highly vertical. Each was built to govern a specific, siloed slice of the digital economy. The AI Act breaks this vertical structure. It acts as a horizontal regulation that cuts through every single one of these categories at once. When an AI system processes user data for a web platform, it simultaneously triggers requirements from at least 3 of these different vertical silos. The AI Act functions as a tripwire that simultaneously triggers the entire digital acquis. The most significant friction point is the collision between the AI Act and data protection laws. The AI Act mandates that deployers of high-risk systems conduct a Fundamental Rights Impact Assessment, or FRIA. Simultaneously, the GDPR requires a Data Protection Impact Assessment, or DPIA, for the processing of personal data. These requirements force companies to execute entirely duplicative procedural workflows for the exact same AI model, often requiring the same documentation under 2 different regulatory names. This overlap creates a legal ambiguity regarding fundamental rights of access and erasure. Complying with the GDPR erasure request is technically near impossible once personal data has been dissolved into the mathematical weights of a complex neural network. This jurisdictional conflict forces engineering teams to solve legal paradoxes that neither regulation addresses on its own. The conflict extends into the information society sector, specifically involving the Digital Services Act. The AI Act regulates the generation of manipulated content, demanding transparency markers for synthetic media. However, the DSA regulates the moderation and hosting of that same content. Very large online platforms that also operate general-purpose AI models are the primary victims of this overlap. These entities most manage risk under 2 different frameworks simultaneously, often running their data through conflicting compliance filters. This pattern of structural redundancy repeats with the Cyber Resilience Act, adding yet another layer of required cybersecurity assessments. Regulating different stages of the same data pipeline under isolated laws creates systemic legal jeopardy for developers. These micro-level legal contradictions lead to a macro-level crisis for the European market. Navigating these duplicative requirements delays time to market and deters the uptake of new technology, creating a massive, multi-layered bottleneck. This burden disproportionately affects domestic startups and SMEs, while favoring multinational firms with the legal resources to absorb the compliance overhead. Enforcement adds another layer of complexity, as the EU relies on a network of dozens of national supervisory authorities. This creates a risk of market fragmentation, where different national regulators issue conflicting interpretations of these overlapping laws. The newly formed EU AI Office is tasked with centralizing this governance, but overriding these national discrepancies is a massive challenge. Without unified enforcement, This regulatory friction will hollow out Europe's ability to maintain a sovereign and competitive AI industry. To fix this, the EU must find a way to maintain its safety standards without suffocating the innovation it needs. The solution is a move away from siloed legislation toward a unified architectural framework built on a bedrock of fundamental EU values. This model requires two central pillars: a unified digital strategy and a set of common regulatory principles applied across all digital laws. Within this structure, specific technologies can be regulated holistically beneath a singular roof of unified enforcement. Transitioning to this integrated model would convert compliance from a disjointed obstacle course into a predictable engineering pathway. Immediate short-term fixes are possible. Supervisory bodies should issue joint guidance and promote mutual recognition, allowing a single assessment to satisfy multiple laws. In the medium term, light-touch legislative amendments could untangle the overlapping definitions between AI, cybersecurity, and data protection. Ultimately, safeguarding Europe's constitutional values requires a harmonization of the laws already on the books. To see how these compliance requirements translate into actual model architecture, visit Learn by Doing with Stephen. For deeper discussions on the intersection of tech policy and data architecture, listen to the Stephen Data Talk podcast on Spotify and YouTube Music. The long-term viability of artificial intelligence in Europe depends on the integrity of its legal architecture.